Liebe Gastfreunde, liebe Gastgemeinde, wir haben gehört, alles gehört Gott. Wie geht es wirklich praktisch? Ist es möglich in einem Alltag, wo wir viel haben, was uns bereits gehört? Unser Freund Larry teilt seine Gedanken mit uns darüber. Willkommen zu unserer Reihe.
First of all, I just want to say how much I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the issue of stewardship. It's one of the most important issues in the Bible. It's interesting that there are over 2,300 verses dealing with stewardship, 500 on prayer, and 500 on faith. So the question is why? Why is there so much emphasis on stewardship? Because I think once we commit ourselves to the Lord and He has control of our checkbook, He's got control of us. The whole concept of stewardship started with me when I was in college. We were just married. My wife was earning $180 a month, and the first check we wrote out for 10% was $18. So we ended up living on $60 a month. Our food bill was $60 a month, and we lived on $42. And God used that as a way of teaching us how to live with the concept of a tithe and an offering. That same concept applied the rest of our lives. At that time, we had a budget of 6 categories. Today, with a computer, we have a budget of 54 categories. But the same principle still applies. So the concept of sacrificial giving applies to no matter how much we make and how much we earn. And it's something that we have carried on for the rest of our life and tried to apply that principle to the rest of our lives. I think God has rewarded us to our faithfulness. There's a verse in Malachi that says, "Test me, says the Lord." And the question is, what does that mean? And we really struggle with trying to comprehend how much God is interested in what we do. In 1 Chronicles 29, David was the one who helped build the temple, and he was one of the wealthiest people that has ever lived. And his conclusion was that, who am I that God should bless me so abundantly and give me a people that would give so generously? And so that concept that everything belongs to God is really critical. It's interesting that when we look at our lives, even when we're children, we start talking about my toys, my bicycle, my job, my career. So we in the 20s and 30s, we talk about my home, the things that I do. And David said, no, it all belongs to God. And so that whole principle of learning to surrender everything we have under God's control is really critical. I think one of the really important things in trying to live out the principle that everything belongs to God is to have a budget. And the budget can be very small to begin with. It can only have a couple of categories. But if we determine how much we're going to give, and we give that first, then we allocate the remainder to the various needs that we have. And sometimes it can even be done in envelopes. You take cash and put in various envelopes for groceries and rent and the other things. But it's very helpful to be able to have a budget and to think about how we're going to spend that money that God has given us. I think the concept of everything belongs to God is a lifetime pursuit. As much as we know what that means when we study the Bible and study the principles behind it, it's something it takes a lifetime for us to comprehend and be able to live out. One of the things I often talk about is when we're in our 20s, why don't we give then? Well, the reason we can't give in our 20s is because we're just getting started in our career. But what about the 30s? Can't we give when we're in our 30s? And we say, well, we can't give then because we're having children, and the children need resources. And then we get to our 40s and we say, well, we can't give there because our children are going to college, so we've got to save money for their college. In our 50s, we can't give because we've got to get ready for retirement. In 60, we retire, we can't give then. 70, we can't give because we're on a fixed income and inflation is taking its toll. And 80, we're nearing the end of life. So the question is, when do we give? If we don't give in any one of those sectors, when do we give? Somebody said, well, the way to give is spend whatever you want, and in your estate, give it away. What's the problem with that? It doesn't take faith. It takes faith to start giving when you're in your 20s, when you don't have the resources and you're just getting started. And you can do it with a small amount, even a smaller percentage than 10%. But then you practice throughout life honoring God with His blessing on your life.